All right, let's talk about something that's at the very heart of education. But let's be honest, it sounds kind of boring. The curriculum. So when I say curriculum, what pops into your head? Probably a giant, heavy textbook, right? Or maybe you're thinking of this super strict, minute-by-minute plan a teacher has to follow, no exceptions. Yeah, that's the classic idea. But what if? What if that whole picture is just wrong? I want you to just throw that old idea out for a second. And instead, picture this, a curriculum that isn't some dusty old document. It's something alive, something that breathes and changes, literally from one moment to the next. Okay, so let's dive into that. We're going to rethink what a curriculum can be. This brings us to what's called a dynamic curriculum. So what is that? Well, basically, it's a curriculum that isn't set in stone. It actually changes while the teacher is teaching. It's not about just sticking to a script, you know? It's all about the teacher making calls on the fly based on what's happening right there in the room. You know, student questions, those moments where everyone looks confused, or even those sudden sparks of interest. And if you look at the key principles here, you can see what that means in practice. Learning stops being a one-way street, like a lecture, and becomes this interactive, responsive thing. The students themselves can actually change where the lesson is headed. But, and this is super important, it's not just chaos. Look at that last point. This whole thing relies on the teacher's professional judgment and their ability to be flexible to guide the learning in a meaningful way. Okay, that all sounds great in theory, right? But what does it actually look like? Let's jump into a math class to see it in action.
All right, scenario one. We've all been here. A student's working on an equation, and they make a mistake. And it's not just a small slip-up. It's clear they're missing a key concept.
Now, the static teacher might just say, nope, that's wrong. The answer is 5. Moving on, because they've got to stick to the schedule. But the dynamic teacher, they see this as a red flag, a golden opportunity. They'll literally pause everything, maybe grab some blocks or draw a diagram, and tackle that misunderstanding right then and there. And think about it. That doesn't just help one kid. It stops a tiny crack in their understanding from turning into a giant canyon down the road. All right, how about this one? The class is learning about, say, squaring positive numbers. And a student, out of pure curiosity, raises their hand and asks one of those great what-if questions, something that's totally not on the lesson plan for today. This is where you really see the difference. The static teacher might shut it down with a good question, but that's in chapter 7. We'll get there. The dynamic teacher, though, knows that curiosity is like gold. They grab onto that moment and say, awesome question. Let's figure that out right now. And that teaches something way bigger than just the math. It shows kids their questions actually matter, and that learning is about exploring, not just ticking boxes. And this idea isn't just for math, of course. It works everywhere. So let's switch gears and head over to a science classroom. Okay, so picture this. It's lab day. The students are following the steps in their book. But something's wrong. The experiment totally failed. The liquid that was supposed to turn blue is still clear. The result is just not what the book said it would be. The static response? You must have done it wrong. Do it again. But the dynamic teacher sees this failure as data. They'll say, whoa, interesting. Why do you think that happened? Could it be an error? What were our variables? Suddenly, the lesson isn't about following directions anymore. It's about real science, inquiry, problem solving, and figuring things out when they don't go as planned. That's a way deeper lesson. Last one, and this is a great one. Imagine the class is inside reading about the water cycle in a textbook. And then, out of nowhere, it starts to pour rain outside. The static teacher might say, everyone, ignore the rain, eyes on your books, try to fight the distraction. But the dynamic teacher, they do the exact opposite. They say, hey, everybody, look outside. What we're reading about is happening right now. They connect the textbook to the real world, and boom, that lesson just became something those kids will never forget. So, okay, we've seen these cool examples in math and science. They give you a real feel for what this looks like. But let's zoom out. Why does this actually matter? What's the big deal? I think this quote really nails it. Teaching isn't just about delivering information like you're a mail carrier. It's about responding to what's happening as people are trying to learn. Because let's face it, learning is messy, it's unpredictable, and real teaching means engaging with that mess. And this is the payoff. This is what you get. When a teacher can stop and fix a misconception, kids get a much deeper understanding. When they chase down those curious questions, they're teaching students how to ask questions and find answers. And when they look at a failed experiment, they're building critical thinking. And honestly, those aren't just things you need to pass a test. Those are skills for life. Which brings us to one last really important thought to leave you with. If the curriculum is alive, and if teaching is all about responding to the learner, well, what does that say about our role as learners? It means we have a part to play in this. It means our questions aren't interruptions, they're invitations. Our confusion isn't a failure, it's a starting point. Our curiosity can actually steer the ship. So the real question becomes, how do we become the kind of learners who help bring that curriculum to life?